This is the DRS train.
So, Chicane, tell me, how do you think F1 would have looked if there was no Nicholas Latifi?
I don't think any of us would be here. I think we would have given up on Formula One at this point in time because if there's no goats there to watch, I think interest would have declined, probably cancelled by Netflix. Drive to Survive wouldn't be a thing anymore. We'd probably have 0 races in America. It's a horrible, disparate landscape you're kind of looking at for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. Well, Lewis would be an 8-time champion as well. That would have happened too. There's a lot of downstream effects. A world without Latifi. Maybe George never gets promoted to Mercedes because they're like, oh, actually, he's not so good. If we throw someone else in there that's competing a bit more against him. But I think, I mean, I was trying to think about this, and because he was in the Williams Academy, and they didn't really, it basically existed just for him because they made it a few years earlier for Lance Stroll, and he was already in Formula One, and I think when he joined, there wasn't anyone else there. So maybe without him, they would have picked someone from outside of it. And my first thought would have been De Vries because he won F2, and he would have, by that point, probably already had connections to Mercedes. Because he then went on to do Formula E and not WEC with them, but Formula E and testing with them. I don't know what George would have thought of that, though, to be honest, having De Vries up against him, another Mercedes junior that's also looking to move up to the main team eventually.
Yeah, it wouldn't have helped with any of the. I think there was a lot of rumours at the time that Williams were kind of becoming an unofficial Mercedes junior team at that point in time, given they had Russell there and obviously the Mercedes power units as well. And I think Williams are always constantly trying to distance themselves from those kind of rumours as well. So having De Vries in there would have been an interesting proposition. I mean, let's not forget that De Vries was quite, well, for that brief little kind of summer period after he made his little cameo for Williams, was very kind of highly rated up and down the paddock. He was linked with about 100 different drives for the next year. I think he tested for Alpine, and Williams, I know, kind of actively wanted to sign him. And obviously then he wound up at AlphaTauri or whatever it was called at that point in time. So maybe it wouldn't have been necessarily a terribly bad thing. Maybe it would have made Russell look perhaps even more impressive if he could have kind of outshone someone more highly rated than Latifi.
Yeah, because I mean, I suppose it shocked everyone how De Vries underperformed at AlphaTauri, but I don't know if that was a skill issue or if that was more just because it was a bit of a weird decision to drag him into the B team of a team, but that normally is meant for the actual junior drivers, some of which by that point had been there for a very long time already. And then they drag him in off of the basis of, well, one race that he did with Williams, but then also, I guess, because they thought, well, he's won Formula E and Formula 2, and in 22, he did testing for Williams, Aston, and Mercedes, including with Aston on the same weekend he then drove for Williams. So pretty prolific, but it just didn't come together for whatever reason. And it's like, of all the established drivers, I feel like Tsunoda is one of the easiest ones for rookies to beat. If you consider, I mean, he wasn't a technical rookie because he'd already done that race. And at his age, I mean, he was 24, 95, 96, so he's almost 30 now, even though he doesn't look it. But 2020 with him and George, that would have, if any points had come their way, I don't know, because they didn't quite happen that year. I think they finished 11th 4 times or something. But it would have been, going into 21, I think it would have been interesting because everyone at that point wanted George to take over from Bottas, and then you would have had both of them, and it's like, well, which one does it, really? Yeah,
it would have been maybe a sort of more closely knit thing potentially in 2020, and I wonder it would have pushed George a little better, because I know that was definitely that kind of era where Williams were definitely kind of among the slowest, but always kind of just on the cusp of points. And George just had that frustrating tendency of just about being able to get into the points and then doing something to kind of throw it away, like when he kind of crashed off just behind the safety car. I think it was in Imola that year. I think it was. I don't know. Maybe with the De Vries pushing him better, those mistakes would they have been kind of more pronounced, or would it kind of have maybe settled him down more as a driver, knowing that he had a kind of a tougher benchmark to meet? It's difficult to know, but yeah, there's definitely an intriguing proposition there of whether, what effect De Vries kind of has on that whole timeline there in terms of what happens with George's career at that point.
Because that race, the Imola race, I think that was basically the only one where they were running in the points, either him or Latifi. Maybe De Vries would have done better in those cars because that was a different era. That wasn't the ground effect cars. But we see some drivers, the transition from F2 to F1, or as it was GP2 to F1, sometimes doesn't work because the cars just work differently and or things don't come together. And I guess De Vries is an example of that. But something that gets pointed out anyway is that his title-winning year in F2 had one of the weakest grids that F2 has had because, Latifi was runner-up and there was Camera was in there, Eilert and Schumacher were in their first seasons as well. One of the most promising drivers, Hubert, died mid-season, and then there was a lot of just pay drivers and that, so it wasn't really Formula 2 at its best. It, for the most part, seems to have gotten better in terms of standards. I mean, Roy Nissany is gone now at long last. I mean, for sure still hanging around, but there's a lot of drivers in there that show a lot more promise than they did around that time, I think.
Yeah, but for sure can at least, win races and be quite competitive on occasion, whereas Nissany was just sort of there for a great kind of chunk of it. Yeah, I'm just kind of scanning through that 2019 list. It's always interesting when you go back and look through those kind of junior categories and see who was there and who was kind of not in and around there. I mean, like you say, yeah, De Vries at the top, followed by Latifi. Then you have to kind of scan down. We've got Zhou Guanyu's in kind of 7th place. Antoine Hubert, like you mentioned, Schumacher, Mazepin all the way down in 18th, and yeah, that's just about it in terms of kind of those who would make it up into kind of the top tier. And Jack Aitken as well, for I suppose he had a little kind of cameo as well. But yeah, it's a veritable who's who of kind of sort of those journeyman racers and people who just weren't quite good enough to make it into that top spot.
Yeah, there's most of the people here, they've either retired or they're in WEC or something now. It's not. Yeah, it's kind of nuts that Latifi finished second. I mean, that's a huge margin that De Vries won it by 52 points is. With reasonable results, I mean, 4 wins. I mean, we've seen more dominance than that before, but then we've had seasons, even like last year, Bortoleto was just consistent without being outright destroying people. And in Formula 3, Fornaroli didn't win a single race, but still managed to win the title, which that almost never happens in any series of any kind. Yeah, but I know that F2 is, a lot of people almost don't accept it because it's so much of it is just a lottery on engines, and that dictates how you look on track, but also just performance because if they're breaking down all the time or whatever, and that, makes a huge difference to your future career, really. I'm assuming, because we've never really talked about it before, I'm assuming you do watch the feeder series or keep up with them then.
Keep up with it. I very rarely get a chance to watch it just because of everything else kind of going on. It's hard to set aside time to watch most of the stuff. I'll always keep track of the results and see who's winning, but I don't look into the last time I actually watched either an F2 or F3 race, really.
I mean, I can usually watch F2. F3 races, I missed most of them last year because they're always on at fucking 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday. Or whatever. I mean, the first set of them this year, because it's Australia, they're going to be at 10 o'clock at night. So that's the night before, which I remember last year that felt very strange.
Going to bed, watching a race, and then
watching it
for more racing.
Watching it at midnight, but also the track just looked different because it was fairly early in the morning in Australia, and the sun was quite low down. And I was like, this does not look like Albert Park because we're used to the sun. I'm used to it being late afternoon and the sun being on the other side. But it kind of fits because I haven't watched Australia live since probably 2009, 2010. I think back when I was a young whippersnapper and still keen enough to get up early for each race. 2009, I remember getting up at 5, 6 a.m. to watch that because afterwards me and the family were flying off to Rome for a week. So that was a very odd day because I woke up early, watched this quite wacky race where we have all the same drivers as last year, more or less, but the grid has been turned on its head because there's Brauns at the front, Red Bulls at the front, McLaren and Ferrari are at the back, and then everything kicks off in the race. And then I'm flying my first, and then I know that in a couple of hours is my first time on a plane and my first time being abroad. So that one was a very strange one. I think I did get up for 2010. I remember that one because that's when Vettel spun off from the lead because of the brakes dying. But after that, I was like, I can't be asked to get up that early, particularly once I was at uni. for races like that. But this time, the one coming up in 3 weeks now, it's at 4 a.m. because it's before daylight savings as well. So it's like there's no chance I'll just watch a replay in the morning or something.
I've never felt the urge to get up and watch an Australian race. I don't think I've ever seen one live. It's just, I can just about manage to see a Japan or a China or something like that. But Australia has just always been a big no-no. Just no chance at all.
Because China is, I haven't watched Japan live in God knows when, actually. I feel like I was watching 2014, but that one must have been delayed because I don't remember getting up stupidly early, but I remember watching that one on TV. They must have delayed that one because normally, like it's like 6 a.m. The Chinese one's at 7 or 8 a.m., so that's a bit more manageable. Like I think because last year I'm pretty certain I watched it live. But this year, I suppose they're all near the start, so we got them out of the way early, and then I don't think there's any more beyond that because Singapore's at night. We don't do Malaysia anymore, and that I don't really remember that ever being particularly early either.
No, I think it was like 6 or 7 or something like that. You had that kind of little stretch of early stuff early on in the season, and then you would sort of then get to more like Bahrain and more kind of Eurocentric, and it was kind of more of a socially acceptable time to be watching Formula One. And then obviously you'd end up back in Japan towards the end of the year, where again you could switch back on that as well. But yeah, Malaysia doing too bad, certainly not as bad as Australia was anyway.
Because I know that they're a couple of hours closer to us than Australia, but I just don't remember it being very early ever. Like it maybe because for me, early is anything earlier than like 8 a.m. Which I can get up for that, but it's like 6 a.m. I really don't fancy it. Because I was considering, because it's the first race of the season, I probably should get up to watch Australia. But then when I heard it was going to be like 4 a.m., I was like, no, that's not happening. I'll just, not look at my phone until whenever the replay's shown and do it that way, which is what I did with Vegas last year and the year before. Because again, that's an interesting time slot. Because 10, 11 p.m. in Vegas, yes, but then that's that's like very early in the morning on the East Coast. Again, very early in the morning here. It's very nice if you're in Australia or Japan, but for a lot of other people, it really doesn't work.
Yeah, Australian, Japanese, everyone kind of Asia-centric, Oceanic region are rejoicing at getting to watch a Grand Prix at normal time, whereas obviously it's normally so Eurocentric in a way, but it's absolutely horrible. We're complaining about having to watch 2 or 3 races a year at a horrible time, and that's just the lifestyle for most people around that part of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah, because when I was considering at a time spending like 6 months or a year in Australia, I thought to myself, well, I'd like to do that just for the experience of it, but from a Formula One perspective, it's really not ideal because almost no races are. Well, there's literally 4 races a year if you include Vegas, that are actually at a convenient time. Because even the normal, like Miami and COTA, those are about 8 p.m. here. And that would translate to like 5, 6 a.m. in Australia, roughly. So they're not even at a brilliant time. So it's rough. I mean, you wonder with Josh how he copes, because that's a 13-hour difference in New Zealand. So every single race is in the middle of the night, except for the American ones and the ones in Asia. But there are also ones that maybe we don't need to have. The things like Vegas that we don't necessarily need to have because there's complaints about 24 race calendar, just too much to cram in, partly from the teams and drivers because it's how much traveling it is. I suppose this year they have streamlined it more because they put the Asian races at the start, and they've moved they've moved Miami and they put Miami and Canada together, I think, as well, instead of having Imola in between them, and Baku's been moved as well. So it is a bit more. It's better. It is a bit more streamlined. But I mean, I've looked at this myself. That you should really have a calendar that starts in Australia and isn't into Lagos, and it does a sort of arc across, going from east to west across the world. Now, the drivers, they go home between races, but the team equipment and it gets shipped out. On that front, it's a bit more efficient, I guess. But they're starting to listen there, I think.
Yeah, it makes the most sense, and it's always been confusing, I think, for a casual viewer to understand from a environmental reason more than anything why it's just constantly hopping back and forth from 2 places, and it's in Asia for a couple of races, then we hop across to Europe for maybe 1, and then over to North America, and then we get back to Asia again. It just seems there should be I know there's obviously always logistical reasons and why you can't make it as streamlined of that as possible, but it is so almost kind of oversaturated nowadays. I know that's such a kind of older generations to thing to kind of be said, like, oh, back in my day it was so much nicer, again. But it was because when I first started watching, we had 18 to maybe maximum 20 races, and it was a good amount for what you got. It kept the action tight, and it also just kept the whole sport quite appealing in a way. I think it's reaching a point now where there is so much Formula One on all the time in a way that it's lost a little bit of that spark for me, and kind of how special it is in a way, in terms of you're looking forward to a weekend coming up because it's the Brazilian Grand Prix is going to be this weekend, and I can centre around that. Whereas when you have, again, so many of these like triple headers and things like that as well, where it's just kind of one after the other. I love watching Formula One, but it's now at points almost starts to feel like an obligation to watch it more than anything, just to keep in touch with things rather than being genuinely excited to see a race every weekend, because it's just too much of it all the time, and especially when it's a less, I'm thinking back to like 2023 as well. I don't think I watched probably at least sort of the last 3 races of the year as well, because it was so much of the same thing every weekend, in and out in a way. So it's hard for both a casual fan and a lifelong fan to get invested when the calendar is kind of becoming the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the triple headers, it becomes a bit oversaturated because you get used to it, and then weekends without F1, you're like, this is really weird now, because it's like, I feel like I need that. I mean, I enjoy the fact that I don't need to think about getting up early to watch F2 and stuff, but even I'm like, I feel a bit lost when you get that. Whereas it used to be, because now there are races you get rid of, but then there are ones we want to bring back to replace it with, and it seems like we had that compromise 20 years ago where you could have 19, 20 races. And they were all really good ones, and it didn't seem to matter that we weren't, spending half the season in the Middle East or whatever. Because 2005 had 19 races, and like they were all the good ones. I mean, there was only just the one in the Middle East, which is Bahrain, unless you count Turkey as it's not really the Middle East, but that was there, which is gone. They fit in Imola. We had the Nürburgring and the Hockenheimring to both. There was no. This is before like Malaysia was there still. There was no US race. No, yes, there was. Technically, I mean, it almost didn't happen. Brazil, but no Mexico. Canada was there. It seemed to just work, and we've had because Herman Tilke. There's been a lot of circuits from him. Fewer these days. I mean, his son has made some of the more recent ones, and there's been others that other people have done. Not many of them have really landed properly, because that kind of begins like Sepang onwards, and Sepang was amazing. Bahrain is okay, the races are okay. Shanghai is a good circuit, but the races are Valencia flopped. Singapore again is okay. Bud flopped. The circuit was great, but the races were boring, and then the government squandered that one. Kota is good enough for what it does. Baku has started becoming good, but I remember when that one first appeared, and I was like, why are we going to Azerbaijan of all places? Like, this is really random, this like former Soviet bloc nation that hasn't produced any racing drivers that I know of and has no connection to Formula One, but the circuit, it kind of works, actually. Been fairly entertaining. Korea flopped, although I actually really like that circuit, but the races didn't work. What else did he make? Abu Dhabi, we don't need that anymore. It's very, very, very touch and go. I mean, there are some they're around for so long, you sort of get used to them being there, like Abu Dhabi, because that's been on the calendar for 16 years now. Bahrain's been on it for over 20 years, and it's like we used to get by without them, and the calendar works, even if it was even more Eurocentric than it is now. It had the right balance.
Yeah. Well, how about we do this for like a little thought experiment? We'll say me and you, we've been put in charge by the FAA to make the calendar for 2026 on. We get our entire pick of every circuit that F1's ever raced at. We'll worry about the logistics of quite what order it goes in later on, but let's just pick out X amount of circuits that we could have on our dream kind of calendar, and what we can kind of get rid of to make way for that. What do you think about something like that? Yeah,
and any circuit from F1, of course. I just did a video on this, so that's fresh in my memory. I can think of. So we'll stop with Avis, Pescara, Nordschleife.
Just 18 Avis races back to back.
All the big ones. We can have that. Yeah. We can have the East German Grand Prix and then the West German Grand Prix in the Nordschleife, and all of throw those in. All the big circuits. Yeah. Being realistic, I suppose, and I've said this before, I feel like it should be a maximum of 20 races. That's a reasonable, reasonable, because that gives you, I mean, you can avoid triple headers. Maybe there's one triple header in there, but 20 is a good number because it's not, overly exhausting. And also because we had last year or the year, I think it was last year, Baku would have been 20 years earlier, would have been the season finale. And but there was we had like another 8 races after that to go or something. So yeah, well, my first thought is to start in Australia.
You've got to start in Australia, I think.
Yeah,
it's just so. I'm so excited that we are going to be going back to Australia because it just always has been the start of the season for me. And I know that it's in some ways fairly recent. I think it was only from '96 onwards that we actually started going there before when they switched from Adelaide to Melbourne. But for me, it's such. This is the start of the season, and that whole kind of early nature to it as well for us in Europe is, I think, a big part of that as well, because there's all that excitement kind of building up to that first weekend of the year, and then for most of us we don't even actually get to see it live because it's so early. We want to watch the highlights later or something like that. So you have that whole kind of little bubble on a Sunday morning where you're desperately trying to avoid looking at your phone and on the internet or anything like that, just so you don't see any kind of spoilers for it, so you can then sit down and watch it just after lunch or something like that as well. It's and the circuit as well is fantastic. I think I've always enjoyed watching it and racing it on games and things like that as well. I'm still kind of slightly jarred by the kind of tweaks they've made to it in more recent years, because we don't have that. I don't want to call it a chicane. I guess it's a chicane in some ways before we come up to what you would say is that kind of actual kind of left to right turn you've got going on there. But
turn 8. That's around. I think it's about turn 8 to 10. Is that chicane, and which they got rid of, turned into. I mean, I get that it makes it faster, but it's like that was an overtaking spot. The momentum is better. I mean, the next little chicane afterwards, or kink, that itself has become an overtaking spot more now because it's become so high speed. But yeah, the circuit is okay. The races there's been a few wacky ones. Most of them are just kind of air, but sometimes you don't necessarily need the first race to be a scorcher. I've gotten used to the fact that the races are just okay there. I mean, the Adelaide ones tended to be a bit more entertaining. That was at the season finale, so it was a very different vibe off of it. And the circuit, like, people love it, but it is quite basic. Adelaide, the layout, kind of square with a handle at the bottom. But I originally proposed maybe doing alternating between the two, year by year. But the one I really wanted was Mount Panorama, but that's FIA Grade 3, which is nuts. Because it's just, I can't think of a more perfect circuit to attempt to race on, because it's so narrow, so bumpy, huge elevation change, those 2 enormously long straights after that really technical kind of hill climb sector, and it looks amazing as well. It ticks all the right boxes, but I think that's also a bit of nostalgia from playing TOCA World touring cars religiously on my PS1 back in the day, which is that game is kind of how I discovered a lot of circuits outside of the UK, because before that I only really knew the British circuits from playing TOCA 2 touring cars. So that, yeah, and Bathurst is one of the ones I discovered from that, because Adelaide and Melbourne aren't in that game. But yeah, Australia's where it's just like, getting up early, because again, Abu Dhabi, as much as I dislike it, there is that symbolic aspect of the sun setting on the season when it's the finale, and the sun rising in Australia, you have to get up really early for it. But yeah, to keep it kind of geographically relevant, you'd have to go. I'm inclined to keep Singapore as a night race, and another rule I've always thought about is that maybe there should be a maximum of 25% of races on street circuits.
Yeah, I'm getting quite tired now, especially now we're losing Catalonia. Admittedly, was never a huge highlight in the calendar in terms of racing experiences, but to get rid of that for the sake of yet another kind of street circuit, which I get from that whole, there's the financial element to it of that. If you're inviting people to come down and watch Grand Prix, if it's just immediately within the city that you're arriving at, then it obviously makes a lot of sense logistically, and then it obviously brings a lot of money into that local area as well. But it's just, yeah, I think, so if we're saying we've got like a 20-ish race calendar, I think you're keeping a very select amount of street races. I think, I think Singapore is admittedly never a huge highlight in the calendar for me. I think just because it generally it's always creeped up to that maximum kind of run time for it, so it can potentially drag a bit. But I think the nighttime aspect of it is what makes it such an engaging kind of spectacle to watch, and especially because it was the first one as well. I think if I'm making my dream calendar, we keep it as that kind of sole nighttime street race so that it has a bit more kind of value on it as well.
It's just a bit unique because it's in a really modern cityscape as well, because historically when it comes to street circuits, F1 doesn't have a brilliant track record on that front, because it's things like Monaco's been there since the beginning, but then you had like Boa Vista and Monsanto in Portugal, Long Beach, which was a good circuit fair, Dallas was rubbish, Phoenix wasn't brilliant, Detroit was the drivers didn't like it. Baku is good. What are the other ones? Pescara was good, but for the wrong reasons, I guess. Poem Garden was pretty bland. Most of them are from a bygone era, to be honest. They're ones you can't really compare to how a modern circuit. Right? Nobody would build anything remotely like Avis or Pescara anymore these days. But yeah, as a night race, and the races, there's often some element of drama because every race except the one last year has had a safety car. So there's usually, even if they do drag. I remember the 22 race was a very odd race, and it just felt like it wouldn't end as well. There was a lot of weird stuff in that one. But as we're in that neck of the woods, then we have to go back to Malaysia as the next one, I'd say. That's one of the few. It's the first Tilkadrome and also the best. Like, everyone wants it back, and it. The issue that race had was the attendance wasn't brilliant, because Malaysia is not a real hotspot destination necessarily. A lot of Australian fans would go to it, but not many Europeans would go, and the government maybe weren't to be able to fund it. It just wasn't realistic, so they had to let it go. But no, Malaysia definitely needs to come back, and then you'd have
Yeah, like I say, it made sense that it kind of disappeared in a way because it's never had that huge amount of kind of garnered interest around it. Even kind of Malaysian interest on the driving front. You had Alex Young in the kind of the early 2000s, and his Malaysian backing kind of went to Minardi then. Then you had a little bit of kind of, when we had the re-emergence of Team Lotus, with Tony Fernandez, and they had Fairuz Fawzi was one of their test drivers at that point in time. But there's never really been much kind of going on beyond that point in time. Even when they kind of had that, what was it, the A1 GP series, that World Cup of Motorsport, I think they even ended up just using Alex Young for their Malaysian entry because there was so little other kind of options really available to them at that point.
His son Alistair is a racer, but he probably would have been too young when A1 that might have been just before Fairuz Fawzi was kind of ready for something like that. But yeah, because Malaysia, it's a bit of a sort of motoring oasis in that part of the world, because it has Proton and Petronas and the Lotus brand that was owned by Proton that raced in Formula One. So it's actually it's very small, but it has something of an element of a motoring industry, whereas the other ones, the other Southeast Asian countries don't have that. The only association, like Thailand, has had Prince Bia and Alex Albon, and there is a circuit, Buriram, is a FIA Grade 1 circuit. I don't think F1 necessarily needs to go there, other than if they thought, well, let's do this for Albon because it's going to draw the numbers. But because the circuit itself is quite plain. But those are the kind of those two, at least, Singapore and Malaysia, amongst the Southeast Asian circuits, are good ones. And we almost went to Vietnam. That was. Yes. I don't know what to think of that, because Vietnam is like, this is not. I know that it's up and coming and they're still recovering from the war but Vietnam is not. There's no connection to Formula One at all. I can't think of a single Vietnamese Formula One driver. It doesn't have much, if any, of a motoring industry either. And the circuit, from playing it in F1 2020, God, it's annoying to drive.
I'm glad you said that as well, because part of me was sat there thinking, maybe I'm just really shit. Maybe I'm just terrible at racing games. I'm like, no. Sinead, you've won, world championships and that as well. So you can do this. You can definitely drive on these F1 games. But then every time I went to Vietnam, I would always be crashing. I think there's that really kind of tricky, almost kind of like a little wiggly S, where there's tight walls on either side, and inevitably a wing was always kind of coming off at that point in time.
I think it was so tight that if you aimed it right, you basically could do a straight line through them. It was because it was just concrete walls. And the first turn, I absolutely detest like hairpin turns that get tighter as they go round, which is what the first turn does. And then those enormously long. It was just such a bizarre like you look at it and there was nothing remotely organic in how it was designed, because apart from that technical bit, it's public roads. I say it's built on a highway. It's like a really perverse version of Avis, or like a Formula E circuit, because it just goes down one route of the highway and then turns around and goes back up the other, and then has that little wiggly bit. It just I don't know what the contract length was going to be, if it was like one of these bullshit things like with Qatar, where it's like 10-year contract before you've even raced there or something. But there would have been some crashes in practice. People would have been hitting the wall in that technical sector. Maybe the race would have been chaotic, but it's kind of hard to tell because it was just such a bizarre circuit. And I think attendance would have been abysmal as well. Like hardly anyone would have shown up.
Yeah, it would have been definitely one of those kind of notorious kind of things we would have seen, throughout history. One of those almost kind of like Las Vegas, the first incident there back in the 80s, where it's kind of lives in notoriety for kind of how bad things potentially were. We could be talking about the Vietnamese editions. I mean, we'll never know. I think we've already kind of said we'd probably skip over China. I mean, in a financial world, obviously you should be going to such a large nation as that. But in terms of circuit interests, we both kind of agreed that it's not terribly interesting. And I think if we're sticking with Asia, I think obviously, I'm pretty sure we'd put Japan and Suzuka on this map. But for me, I wouldn't put it around this at this early stage in the season. For me, again, it's one of those ones which is very integral to being kind of that part of that last almost trio of races in a way, where it was it was almost kind of in the heat of some sort of championship battle going on. I think it still is the circuit where the most championships have been decided, but I'm maybe misremembering a statistic like that. But obviously, you've had so many kind of wonderful late season jewels there in the past, from Senna and Prost to Raikkonen's 2005 kind of masterclass as well. So that's got that Suzuka surely fits on the kind of definitely above like a Fuji Speedway anyway.
Yeah, this is something I kind of, when I discussed this on one of my own videos, I got in trouble for, is bringing in the element of human rights and issues around what governments are doing in countries about whether we should really be, letting them have a Grand Prix. And China is one of those ones where it's like, okay, we've been going there for 20 years. It's a good circuit. The races are not bad. Zhou Guanyu's been on the grid. Before that, we even had, Ho Ping-tung and Ma Qinghua as connections to F1. The economy is huge. It's probably important to have them on side, maybe with the geopolitical situation. But then there is, the whole genocide going off way out in the desert, far away from Beijing, that they want to pretend isn't happening. And it's stuff like that. And it's like, do we really need to be? Because there are some countries where people are outright like, no, we can't race there because they're doing this or this is happening or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, you need to apply a reasonable standard to others, where even if the circuit is good, that we need to think, well, if this stuff is happening, maybe we shouldn't be giving them our money or our hospitality. I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely agree. It's that horrible kind of moral grey. Unfortunately, it's sports washing is the term, isn't it, when it comes to these sort of things? Obviously, the Football World Cup in Qatar is a big example of that as well. And there's all these kind of this horrible kind of human rights issues that it's horrible that we should even have to be talking about that, when this should just be a sport about kind of the pure passion for racing and not money centric. And I think that's what we can kind of chat about today, is picking that kind of stuff which is more in line with what we want in terms of from a calendar and the places we want to be going and what we want to be kind of promoting around the world, sort of thing. I mean, if we're looking at one thing that's often kind of touted when they're putting together a calendar is that Formula One is a world championship and therefore needs to be going kind of all the way around the world. That was kind of a large part about trying to get America within to that kind of Grand Prix circle, as well as that, America is obviously such a large part of the automotive industry and things like that as well, that it always needed to be a part of it as well. So the one that's been kind of debated a lot more in recent times is getting Africa back onto the calendar, because we've not been there since we last went to South Africa and Kailami there. And I think it's, Rwanda is the one that's being discussed as a potential future venue there. I mean, I have no kind of emotional connection to it because I've never seen it racing, but from the perspective of this needs to be a quote unquote world championship, do you think we need to be kind of heading to Africa as part of that?
I think so, yes. I mean, South Africa, for a long time, it was the only race that was actually kind of politically controversial, because of apartheid. Because back in this day, the 70s, the 70s, 80s, the other countries, no one really gave that much thought. And then it didn't start becoming an issue again until we started racing in the Middle East. But I think it does. The issue is it's finding somewhere suitable, because the only countries that have hosted a race before are South Africa and Morocco. Morocco was an interesting one. Well, they did one race in 1958 on this street circuit, which had been built a few years earlier. That kind of came out. There was there was a Moroccan driver, Robert Lacaze, even though he was French, of French extraction, but raced as a Moroccan. There was Andre Guelfi, was born in Morocco, but then he raced for France because it had been a French colony until like 2 years before the Moroccan Grand Prix took place. So that's sort of the French heritage, the French connection, if you will, is probably the reason that race happened. South Africa was around for a lot longer. We have a champion from South Africa. There were a lot of other drivers like Tony Maggs, Desiree Wilson, people of like that. It's surprising, really, back in the day. We haven't had any since 1980. There were a lot of drivers from those kind of what at the time were colonies in Africa. Well, South Africa wasn't, but we had drivers from what is now Zimbabwe and Zambia racing as well, but they were of British heritage because at the time it was Rhodesia, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of that happening. South Africa today, it's a bit complex because the circuit is actually Kyalami is grade 2, so they need to modify that. The circuit is nice enough. The current layout's been raced on before when they returned in 92 and 93. Because before that, the original layout that was used in the 60s, the 80s was nothing like the modern one. There isn't, but there's been problems of like politically, it's a bit turbulent, recurring blackouts. So that is not something that an F1 race needs if they're trying to run a race there. It's just little things like that it's the obvious choice, because I've heard talks of Rwanda, and they keep, because they moved the FIA award ceremony there last year, but Rwanda doesn't have a circuit as far as I know. They would need to build one first and then try and get the hype. I feel like attendance again would be very poor, so South Africa is the only realistic option, I think.
The other debate we have a lot of the time is making sure that kind of the calendar is spread around the world, and then it's also thinking about what you would call kind of these legacy circuits on the calendar as well. There's ones that have been around for so long, and it's a question of whether the fact that they have a legacy should allow them to continue on the calendar. Monaco is the kind of prime example of that debate, which we keep having year on year, and as these cars kind of get bigger and bigger and wider, we're discussing this not long after a time where supposedly the FIA introducing kind of more mandatory pit stops at Monaco to kind of improve the racing there. I mean, from my perspective, I can't imagine a calendar of Formula 1 year without Monaco there. Obviously, I know we did during kind of the COVID years as well, but regardless of kind of how much of a kind of a snooze fest it can be at times in terms of the lack of overtaking and action, and almost kind of the trouble we have nowadays is that everyone is so reliable and we have such a strong depth of talent in the field right now. I recall watching the Monaco Grand Prix when I was a kid, and only about 8 or 9 cars would finish the race because this it's a time where you'd be rife with engine failures and people colliding in the tunnel or something like that. I'm thinking of sort of like the 2004 edition in a way, which is one of kind of the earliest races I can kind of picture in my mind. But nowadays, reliability is bulletproof, and it's people make so kind of few mistakes in kind of the heat of the moment now that it just become a bit of a procession. But I mean, how do you kind of feel about Monaco being on the calendar? Does it need to be there? Do we need to tweak it? What sort of stuff does it need?
It should stay. I think it's a very bad precedent to get rid of Monaco, because it's been there for so long, and it's so synonymous with Formula One, more so than like Silverstone, Spa, Monza, the other 3 OG circuits that have been there since 1950. Like, this is what people think is the glamour element. It is huge, and the playground for the rich and the yachts. It's so emblematic of Formula One. It's only started becoming bad in the past 10 years or so, since the hybrids, really, when they got bigger, that we've struggled. We haven't really had any good races. I mean, that being said, last year it wouldn't end. 23 was good. 22 could have been good, but then they decided, let's just wait till the rain is gone, and denied us the chance to have a race with all 5 tyre compounds being used at the start. But 21, no. 19 was bad. 18 was sucked. I don't remember anything about 17. Yeah, they were just processions. I mean, I'm not a fan of. Something feels quite wrong about dictating the number of pit stops you should do, but then we technically already do that because you have to use both tyre compounds. But it's like maybe it's the only way to fix it is, or to maybe make it more vague to say you have to use all 3 tire compounds if it's a dry race, because that then means at least 2 stops per race. But it just doesn't. Putting in even more restrictions. But I feel like in the case of Monaco, it's a sort of special circumstance that really dictates that at the moment.
Yeah, it's got that special charm about it, and maybe we kind of need to tweak it so it kind of has a bit more of that prestige back in a way. And I think one thing I read about fairly recently was, there used to be a time where they would limit the number of kind of cars you could have on the Monaco Grand Prix grid because it was such a small place. You would have a smaller grid there than you have at other venues as well. So potentially we could do something interesting there where I think qualifying definitely needs to be tweaked in a way because it's so easy to kind of force traffic there. You could almost kind of have a little one by one, the old kind of shootout system that we used to have where everybody gets a lap or two or something like that as well. There's been talk about kind of doing some special maybe retro or throwback liveries as well, really make kind of a spectacle of it as well. And maybe you do have it the case of where actually only 16 cars start the race. That would never happen in this modern age because of sponsors and all this kind of stuff as well, but it would give an element of prestige back to it as well, of the fact that you raced at Monaco at a time when it was harder to be at Monaco because only X amount of people could actually to make it onto the grid. I'm spitballing kind of things here, but it obviously already will always have that kind of special charm to it. But there are a number of ways you could look at tweaking it so that kind of sticks around a little bit longer.
Yeah, I know that there were some series like when Frecker a few years back they were racing at Monaco and they did limit the number of people that could qualify for races. And I think one year, maybe 20 or 21, one of the ones that didn't qualify was Franco Colapinto, and he made quite a big stink and complained a lot about that. But speaking of Colapinto, Nedzo has joined us. Good morning, Nedzo.
Hello. I don't know why Colapinto is the conversation, the topic surrounding around me, but hello, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are talking about Monaco, yeah?
Basically its viability and its place on the calendar.
I believe that Monaco has a permanent place on the calendar. I just think that you guys were talking about overtaking and about all that sort of stuff. I've always said that up until 10 years ago, overtaking at Monaco was slightly feasible, but not impossible. It's just now that the cars are massively overweight, massively oversized, and people are saying, "Oh, the cars are too big for the track." I remember seeing classic races around there, like 2014, where there was some overtaking. 2012 wasn't a good race that because there was 5 cars right at the end who were just in a massive trip. But there's been overtaking at Monaco since about 10, 15 years ago. I believe that with the 2026 regulations, and if they keep shrinking the cars, I believe that Monaco can come back into favour. It's just like people saying, like, you could make edits to the track layout. I know they've talked about extending the roundabout at Portier. They've talked about stuff like that. I think if you want to make changes to Monaco, the best one you could make is getting rid of a Nouvelle chicane. If you can make the swerve between, because I know there's like a road, the roads don't fully match up, and there's one where you'd have to cut it off slightly. But there's also the swimming pool sector where if you could go onto the I don't know what it is, but there's like a little bit to the where the grandstand is now. I believe if you went back to the old gasworks hairpin and just made it wider, like it was back in the 50s through to the 70s or the early 70s, I think that could also increase overtaking. Yes, it would completely reduce lap times and put it dangerously close to the 1 minute mark, but I believe that would also work. And also, I know if it is a procession and it's a ball fest, I believe that it would make it worse. But also, Monaco used to be 100 laps. Turn it back to 100 laps again, make it the full 300 kilometers. I know sometimes it's a ball fest and sometimes that'll be a bad idea. But let's say you have a wet Monaco race. Who doesn't want to see a wet 100 lap Monaco race?
I mean, we won't get anywhere near 100 laps if it's wet before the 2-hour time limit. I mean, even a dry race, you'd probably struggle to get under that if the race is already about an hour and a half on 78 laps. But the piscine, however you're meant to say it, complex is actually one of the good bits because that's the fast technical bit and that's where the crashes happen. The gasometer hairpin, maybe you could just turn it back into a normal hairpin again and it might be better for overtaking. Otherwise, because those and the Nouvelle chicane, that's all that's really changed in the past literally 100 years with that track. Maybe the chicane needs to be turned back into a kink like it used to be, or they just don't have it at all, and it's a really long run down to Portier. Is that the circuit? Tabac, yeah, the one that Maldonado crashed at. But that one. It's. I mean, he himself has had 3 or 4 crashes at Monaco, different places. But you'd need to make that tighter as well to make it like an actual overtaking spot because it would be way too fast. I don't know.
Again, there's more grandstands there, so I think there would be opportunity to just kind of push out the boat on, quite literally because he ran the harbour, push out the boat on the exit of the corner. And the only thing as it would be the problem would be you could widen it on entry because the road down from Nouvelle, on the right, there's that escape road where people like Damon Hill went in 1996, and drivers when they've crashed have gone down there. It's just when you get to the actual Tabac corner, annoyingly, I'm pretty sure there's like some. Well, you've got the road that goes up, the layout that Formula E used. So you'd have to widen the circuit and narrow the circuit back down again, which could produce a bottleneck. Yeah,
they I don't know why. Obviously, they're limited by what they can do. Also, because there's that avenue of trees that's splitting the two in far. Because the straight after the chicane, most of that is a car park. It's not actually a road, and that's why those line of trees splitting it, which creates the escape road.
Yeah, but who gives a fuck about some trees?
Yeah, but it's just practicality. I mean, there's a reason this circuit has not changed much because they're so limited for growth.
Yeah.
I mean, to my homies that have played Need for Speed Porsche 2000, there's 5 other configurations that could be used that bear little to no assuming the game is accurate to how the Monaco streets actually are, that bear little to no resemblance to the modern circuit. But there are a few things they could. Yeah, there's only a little. It depends if they want to actually change how the road network looks outside of races. But there's a couple of little things to do. But really, the fundamental issue is the cars.
Yes.
We could just go full retro. We get the straw bales back along kind of that harbour bit. We could have that the real threat of the cars kind of jumping back into the harbour like they did in the 50s again. I think that would element of risk.
I think Lorenzo Bandini, Alberto Ascari, and Paul Hawkins might have a word.
I think it was because of those they turned it into a chicane. Because in the 70s, when they first brought it, the chicane was actually right. It was much closer to Tabac. And then they brought it back. And then they brought it back to where the original hairpin, the original chicane was. To be honest, I'm surprised we haven't had, because that part of the track is where we've had some, like Button and Checo both had very big crashes there in the past. That if you get a car airborne enough, maybe they could go over, because the fences aren't massively high. There's every chance you could get one in the river.
Yeah, Wendling, it was called Wendling, had a big crash there as well. 94.
Yes. I mean, of course, that for him, because of him, they put the tires and the Tech Pro in, and that's why Checo had the same crash. But he missed one race instead of the whole season, and he wasn't comatose.
Yeah.
Also, there was in 1950 there was that rogue wave at Tabac, which hit everyone. There's that hasn't. I mean, we don't race in particularly stormy weather, but that's never happened since. But at the time,
behind that. So basically, Fangio was the guy who won that race, and he was the only one who avoided the accident. Mm. Well, it turns out that he'd watched some footage of a race from Monaco in like 1937, where the exact same thing had happened. And so when he saw the fans not looking at the cars go around the circuit and instead looking at the sea, he was like, there's a wave coming. So had to slow down and back off, and he avoided the accident and no one else did. That's the biggest Fangio thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
I mean, the thing is, there's footage of the aftermath, but there's no footage of the wave, and I'm just thinking, how big must the wave have been? Because it wasn't like a stormy day when that. It was in the summer, like it always is normally. I don't know how it
was higher back in the 1950s. I don't know.
Okay, I was trying to think. Global warming, ice caps. No, other way around. But yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, or maybe just the better. Maybe the harbour design. It was worse flood defences, because back again, it was just those little bollards stopping you from flying into the harbour on the run to Tabac. But regardless, no, Monaco needs to stay. But maybe it does. This rule use all 3 tyre compounds or at least 2 pit stops, because that's going to encourage drivers to run probably run the softest compounds. It's like, well, if I know I'm only using them for X number of laps, I can wear them down. Unless they all do what Charles does, which is drive as slow as possible all the time, so it then lasts as long as possible.
Two things. I do like that because it would kind of go back to, because there's a lot of purists that say, "Oh, I want the drive to be pushing 100%, 100% of the time," and that's never happened in Formula One. It's either been fuel saving or tire saving or machine saving or whatever. You've never been 100% pushing, so it would produce some level of that, and people might go for riskier overtakes, but then again, they might not. And secondly, the other thing we have to consider, it's not just a fan's opinion; it's a driver's opinion. Every single driver wants Monaco to stay on the calendar because they want to win there. Like I think Nelson Piquet that said, a win here is 2 wins at 2 wins anywhere else, even though he never won around there and he didn't like the place at all.
Yeah,
people don't realize that Drive to Survive fans need to realize it's not all about them, and that it shouldn't all be. Yes, we might have a boring 78 lap procession every year. I mean, we don't have that every year. We've had banging races in 23, 22 was all right. 2018 and 19 were all right. 2016 was great. 2014 was great. 2012 was all right. 2010 was good. 2008 was good. Like, you don't. Like, it's not like we do have a procession every year. It's only a handful of years you get 2021s and just races like that where there was no overtakes. Like 2003, was it, or 2001, where there was no overtakes?
Well, 2001, that was when Coulthard got stuck behind Bernoldi for like 50 laps or something.
It does happen occasionally, but it's not like we literally get. It's not as bad as the Drive to Survive fans say. And if they want to complain, they can go and fuck off and ruin another sport like cricket or tennis or lacrosse or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it's got that kind of it's something that everyone want to kind of check off. If you think of like every F1 or like sort of budding driver's got like a little checklist in their brain of what they want to be doing. They want to get to Formula One. They want to win the World Championship. You kind of consider like that almost kind of like the main quest. But then you've got these little side quests of win the Monaco Grand Prix is on everyone's bucket list. Win your home Grand Prix, and or even something like just driving for Ferrari or something like that. I think is one of those few things that everybody can kind of agree that's something they want to do at some point in time.
Also, the Triple Crown of Motorsport. If you get rid of the Monaco Grand Prix, you have to replace the Monaco Grand Prix on something else with the Triple Crown of Motorsport, whether it be Britain, Monza, Spa, whatever you want to do. I mean, I've got some outrageous opinions about Monza as well, but we'll get to those, I assume, in due course.
Yeah, I don't really know what you'd replace it with as an appropriate like triple crown race. Triple clown.
Triple Crown's us.
Yeah. We kind of moved, I suppose, because Monaco, because before that we'd been discussing because there's a world show trying to race in Africa and how it needs to happen eventually, but just logistically, it's not the right time. Because South Africa,
it's a North African country that's got no threat of war or dictatorships or whatever,
or isn't it doesn't still have slavery or something. It's like there's not the options are limited because when I was thinking not South Africa, okay. Maybe because we've been to Morocco before, Algeria or Tunisia have potential.
Morocco and Hadjar as well. Think about them.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. Maybe they could build a Tilkodrome in Algiers or something. And it's like, okay, well, it fits because it's Mediterranean. I'm sure it works. And those are, Tunisia is a reasonably popular tourist destination, and Morocco. I don't know so much Algeria, Libya definitely not. Egypt is still too turbulent, but again, obvious tourist destination. But then they're gonna do what I do and build some really cunty street circuit that goes around the pyramids or something, or the paddock is right next to the Sphinx or something like that. And God, the cringe would be off the charts from the social media tat that all the drivers have to do because they'll get them exploring in the pyramids, probably wearing their helmets. And there's going to be fucking they're going to have helmet designs that look like his golden mask and everything.
No. Well. They would have the same way we get the sombreros on the podium in Mexico. We had the little Russian hats there. It would be that full pharaoh outfit. Everyone on the podium, there's a gold one, a silver one, and a bronze one. Wear that on the podium.
The winner's trophy would probably actually be Tutankhamun's golden mask. I mean, it's worth God knows how many millions. It's here you go. It's really heavy. Be careful. So it would be just it would be almost unbearable, I think, to watch.
There's also Rwanda, which I have no bias to because I definitely don't have family over there. I think Rwanda would be a good destination, even if it's a bit of a questionably despotic regime. It's kind of like Singapore in that it's a dictatorship, but it's one that kind of actually works.
I think when it comes to Africa, dictatorships are just a given at this stage. So that's
And also, they literally go to Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain. The only difference between those and those is money.
Yeah, and infrastructure. Because Rwanda, I mean, a lot of sub-Saharan African countries, most of their infrastructure is being built by the Chinese at the moment. But Rwanda doesn't have any circuits. It doesn't have any motorsport heritage. attendance would be abysmal. You would not get. I don't think many people would want to go to Rwanda to watch a race.
Especially with the current price tags.
Yes, as well. I mean, that a lot. Even if you couldn't afford it, I imagine people are saying, "Why are we charging all this amount, which we know that almost nobody from the country can come close to affording?" And it would be impossible to build it and not be exposed to the poverty as well. Because I think even this is something that Lewis commented on when they went to India, that you could see how the normal people were living. It's like, this isn't ideal. And
I mean, in Lagos, they have the favelas right next to the circuit. And you could just do a North Korea where they get loads of spectators to go for free when it's just they've been forced. I mean, not forced to.
A day trip from the concentration camps or something.
Just do a North Korea where they get loads of spectators in for free, so it doesn't look as bad as it actually is.
Yeah, I don't. But Africa needs to happen eventually, but just not now. But we said Japan. Obviously, Japan's staying. China, we're not so sure about that as well. It's
I think when you said Japan's staying, is that Suzuka, or are you going to somewhere like Fuji? Because I think that could be an option.
Either or, but Suzuka is perfectly good. I mean, the thing is, they're both really popular circuits, but Suzuka, when it comes to Formula One, has a far better track record than Fuji does.
The only problem is overtaking. I think Fuji is more future-proof with overtaking and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me personally, from having played them both in, X amount of racing games, I do prefer Fuji is the better circuit from that perspective. Suzuka has just never worked for me.
See, the only thing I say for that is I actually prefer Fuji in its 1960s layout, the one with the Daiichi corner, just because of how fast it is and how insanely good it is.
Yeah, I mean that banking is quite something. But all I'm doing is just referencing my latest video. Is that because it was so dangerous? Because 30-degree banking, but also because they went downhill off a really, really long straight.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a jump. It was basically a jump into it. It was.
I mean, you would need. I don't think the drivers would do that. To be honest,
absolutely not. I'm not expecting them to, because I think it's all been pretty much not demolished, but it's pretty overgrown now.
Well, they'd rebuild it, of course, but you would need enormous catch fencing, because there could be a very serious accident there.
Yeah, they've got on the grid, so.
Yeah, it just. The current one, even though the 80s and 90s, again, I'm referencing Gran Turismo, that layout was. I think for me, I preferred it. The current one, there's nothing wrong with it. It's nice. It's got a good mix of everything. But Suzuka is great. The others are not really ideal, because Okayama that was a flop, because it's in the middle of nowhere and it's a very small circuit.
It's about 2.3 miles, 2.4 miles.
Well, that's the thing. The other circuits are very small, because Motegi is not really. It just wouldn't work. Sportstand Sugo is too small. Tsukuba, maybe Autopolis.
They nearly went there in the early 90s. I think it was 93.
Yeah, Tsukuba is, it's good for MX5s, and that's about it. That's unless they wanted to actually build, because Tokyo Route 246 from Gran Turismo, they could that could be built in real life. The streets are there, and it looks just like Vegas. The layout is so similar to the Vegas circuit.
I think the early Forza Motorsport games had a Tokyo circuit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying this when we said we should have a limitation on the number of street circuits on the calendar, but Tokyo.
Because I don't give a fuck how many there are.
Yeah, but because we originally said limit of 20 races per year, maybe a maximum 25% of street circuits. So we have to be kind of careful, because we've already put down Melbourne is a street circuit, and so is Singapore. So that's 2 already. So then we have to. To
be honest, if it doesn't act like a street circuit, I wouldn't put it on there. I'd give it a half point. So I'd put Melbourne as a half point, because although it's fully roads, it doesn't feel like a street circuit. It's very well molded, and it's not all 90-degree corners.
I was amazed, because my sister was there a couple of years ago on holiday, and I told her to go to Albert Park and take some pictures for me, and I could not believe how different it looks when they don't race there. Because the pit building is there, but nothing else is there. The grandstands are gone, the pit wall, all the fencing, even the fucking gravel traps are gone. It doesn't, the turn 1 gravel trap is a cricket pitch, I think, or a baseball diamond or something, normally.
Monaco's good at that too, or Singapore. They get it all put up and taken down within 6 weeks. It's great.
Yeah, but it couldn't look more different from how it looks during the race weekend. It's very strange. But if we said no to China, how many circuits are we on? 1, Singapore, Malaysia. That's 4.
Which circuits have you put on the calendar already?
So Melbourne alternating with Adelaide, then Singapore, Malaysia.
Adelaide. I mean, in its current form, would not work with modern F1 cars unless you would extend the layout.
Well, extend it back to the way it was because they shortened it again after F1 left.
Even with the '90s layout, I don't think that it would. The longest straight would be about 800 meters. And I don't think it'll work.
Yeah, but the thing is, it has the right corner makeup because and this is something some older drivers have said, is that maybe we need circuits that have more like 90-degree turns because those are good for overtaking rather than Jeddah being this like melted spoon or something with no straights.
I mean, Jeddah's just and shouldn't be anywhere near any racing series ever. But yeah, so you got. So sorry, I interrupted.
So alternating because we can't have Mount Panorama, so we'll do the next best two, alternate with those, unless we go to surface.
Mount Panorama.
Yeah, we'll just
that would be the way we would stamp our authority on the calendar. But listen, guys, we're gonna have Mount Panorama first.
You're stamping your authority on
strange new things happening.
Maybe we'll just force them. Because I'm not. I mean, I'm a bit vague on how the grading system works with circuits. It's to do with, I think it's the size of the paddock, but also like capacity for spectators and some other things.
There's other factors at play because Mount Panorama, I think, is grade 3 because there's literally like animals that can run onto the circuit.
That's another thing I was thinking is we're going to have, because they have those, dinosaurs running around on the track in Singapore, that we're going to get kangaroos getting hit by cars and fucking...
I need to put massive catch fences up. I know it would ruin the view for spectators, but massive catch fences.
Yeah, well, you would need like 10, 15-foot catch fencing to stop kangaroos jumping over it. But then there's also I suppose cassowaries and rheas and massive birds.
I also think barrier clearance at some of the places at Mount Panorama is a problem. There's not really much room for runoff, and you'd have millions of safety cars at points. If someone goes off, it would be
amazing. That circuit is just perfect. It hits all the right buttons. Like those enormous, extremely bumpy straights, and that technical hill climb section is amazing. It's brilliant.
Would F1 catch air at points? I think it would in the S's.
Not in the S's. On the straights, you might catch some air, but not. I mean, because Liam Lawson drove round it a few years ago in a Red Bull car.
But did he actually pelt it round there at full speed?
Well, he did. He did kind of what Nick Heidfeld did at the Nürburgring, which is drive within the limits of not crashing because it's so bumpy and all of that. But it can be done. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, the biggest series that races there is V8 supercars, but those are obviously nothing like Formula One. And as we saw from that race a couple of days ago, they don't seem to mind a bit of argy-bargy as well, and they let them do that too. So yeah. So
Australia, we've done Australia.
I'm in two minds about India trying to make that happen again.
I think Bud was a fantastic circuit. Same with Yongam. I love Yongam. I think that's
maybe I'm looking at this from Carter Kayan tinted glasses or something. But you get Kushmini. That's a push to get Kushmini on the grid for Alpine. But no, the circuit is amazing and it's a huge market. It just didn't. The races were just. They just sucked. I prefer
Yongam because I think Yongam was very future proof, and I think nowadays it would work perfectly with modern cars, long straights, and a very much a variety of content. I call it compared to with especially with the modern layout of the circuit in terms of the one I'm about to mention. It's like an Asian Silverstone.
It's I think it's definitely V8 era nostalgia, but I really like Yongam.
Yes.
It's the most depressing circuit to look at because there's nothing there. It's just built on marshy wasteland right next to a giant industrial estate.
Just pick it up and put it in the middle of Miami.
Yeah, it just it's just that because the plan was to build a big city and like a marina and make it like Abu Dhabi and Monaco, and they built none of that, and so it's just utterly featureless. But it's a great circuit.
Yeah. Did you see the Red Bull video that they posted 15 years ago, and it showed what it was supposed to look like?
I used that in my latest video. So yes.
I didn't watch that video.
Yeah, it's it was that, and it looked like it was going to be pretty cool. But yeah, you can see that there's still roads and thoroughfares and avenues that would have been where everything was going to be, and they just built none of it. And the attendance was really bad because Koreans and F1, there's not much of a history there, and also it was just difficult to get to. It only hosts really, really small series now. But I remember when the circuit dropped and everyone was like, "What the fuck is this?" Because of that enormous back straight and the technical bit, each corner getting gradually tighter than the next one.
Yeah.
And the pit lane, but it's a good circuit. It's sort of on the a short list, maybe. Maybe let's not add it now, but maybe it's like a short list.
You know how we have a European Grand Prix? Maybe have an Asian Grand Prix or something like that.
Yeah.
We could rotate them.
Well, no. It can still be the Korea. Oh, I see what you mean to make it alternate with other countries. Yeah.
Or you could just do what all the sporting organisations seem to be doing and putting countries that aren't in Europe, Azerbaijan, or other countries like that. They keep just putting them in European competition.
Well, that's how we do it because Australia competes in Eurovision, so Bathurst can host the European Grand Prix. It's a post-colonial reference, the New Holland Grand Prix or whatever they used to call it, something like that. India,
Australia, Malaysia. What did you say?
So Australia, Malaysia, Sepang, Japan. Those are the 4 confirmed ones.
Australia, Malaysia, Sepang, Japan. You just mentioned 2 times Malaysia.
Did I say something twice? Singapore, Sepang, Japan. There. You know what? Okay. Going geographically, I guess Baku comes up. I'm inclined to keep it, even.
Baku.
Yeah, it's turned into a modern. At this point, it's like, okay, yeah, it's another dictatorship, but it's kind of turned into a modern classic.
It's one of the good ones.
And I guess it gives a bit of representation to sort of that post-Soviet nostalgia stuff. When it comes to the Middle East, I mean, people won't like this. I'm inclined to drop all 4 races.
I mean, Saudi Arabia, fair enough. Abu Dhabi, fair enough. What's his face?
Qatar needs to go.
Bahrain is the only one to have a question mark, and that's only because in my mind it has a little bit more legacy in terms of it's been around for about 20 years now. So I do, if I'm thinking about a calendar in my mind, I do see Bahrain as part of it. I'm not saying it's the best circuit in the world, at least of all that kind of enormous 2010 version that we had.
On the politics and human rights front, it's also the least volatile of the 4 as well.
I mean, you had the Arab Spring uprisings, but I suppose every Middle Eastern country had that at one point. What I would say about Bahrain is this might be a weird. See, what I've always thought about because Peter knows I've got into NASCAR in the last year or 2, and they have a massive variability and uniqueness in all their circuits. Not all of them, but a lot of them. I believe that Formula 1 should go to the Bahrain outer layout permanently instead of a normal layout.
The sprint layout, or the
one race we had there was absolutely banging, and everyone loved it. Why not go there permanently? It will produce an entertaining race every year, and it's something different. It's something new. It's a 50-second lap, yes. It's a 90-lap race, yes, but it's something new, and it's something that people would enjoy watching because, like, the one thing about F1 that we've had in the last few years is where people have so much data and so much analysis on it that you can't. But when you have 3 DRS straights on like a 2-mile track, and when it's super fast and when there's only about 5 corners, you can't strategize. It's just a slipstream fest.
It would present a really kind of interesting strategic and technical perspective as well, and a real kind of challenge for the drivers as well. Because anytime you've got like a 2-minute lap, you can make a late break into a corner or scrub off your tires or something like that, but you can still kind of claw that back throughout the rest of the lap. We're talking mere tenths, hundredths, if not thousandths between everybody there. If you've just got 50 seconds to be playing with, then you've got a real challenge to be. It's almost kind of like a Monaco in a way, where you have to be inch perfect there to not crash. You have to be inch perfect there to ensure you're gaining absolutely every advantage every single lap, because every slight mistake you're making is going to be crucial to others kind of chasing you or any kind of battles throughout the field there.
What annoys me about modern Formula 1 is if you were to take away all the furniture, all of the runoff, all of the track, and you just grade it all out, and you said to someone who wasn't like fully enthused in Formula 1 and like a casual fan and said, pick out these layouts and tell me which layout each circuit was, they'd probably get Monza, they'd probably get Spa because they're quite like distinct figures and shapes, maybe Silverstone. But that's about all they'd get in terms of which layout is which. There's no real variety in terms of like it's just Tilkedrome, street circuit with a couple of 90-degree corners, Spa and Monza. So I believe that focusing on not just these Tilkedromes and focusing on actual layouts that would produce interesting and different racing. Like, as I said, I think it would just be, especially when we remove DRS and it's just like the energy deployment modes, I think that would just be a DRS test and you'd see people going 2-3 wide, maybe not 2-3 wide into corners because it's not the same way as how NASCAR works with kind of drafting and stuff. But you'd see people literally nose to tail. And it'd be like with an oval race where obviously the first 150 laps of the Daytona 500 is awful. And then the last 50 laps is just chaotic as hell.
But yeah, I like the idea of the outer layout because it's the closest thing Formula 1 would have to an oval, and it's just something a bit different.
I mean, we'll get to that later. I don't think it will be, but we can see.
Yeah, but it would just be because it would be high energy. I mean, that race was chaotic because of the safety car and that very suspect implosion from Mercedes. But it just why not? Because the endurance layout sucked, and the current one it's just okay. I mean, my original compromise when I'd done this all myself was to say, okay, well, Bahrain can host testing, but but then the other races can go because no one wants Jeddah or Qatar.
I think we should also, if we haven't already, we should ban current circuits on the calendar from being testing venues.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah. So they can go. So I mean, Ferrari can go to town at Fiorano if they want, like they used to do back in the day with Michael or whatever. And Mugello can, all of that would be fine. But okay, so I don't know if it counts as the Middle East, but Turkey as well.
Because it's half in Europe, I suppose. I mean,
it's on the it's on the Asian side, but then Turkey in general is considered Europe now.
Well, it plays in all the Europe.
It's kind of the literal crossroads of Europe.
You see, the thing is with Istanbul Park, like, I mean, in 2020, because it did 2 races. It did 2020, which was kind of exciting because they decided to resurface it with marmalade, and then in 2021, it was just kind of air.
Like, even though it was wet, yeah.
That's the thing. I think it was just a fad because they had no data for 2020, and also, as I said, because it was they decided to put fairy liquid on the track surface. If they do that again, and they force it to be, and they put sprinklers on the circuit, and they make it oily and horrible to drive, that would be great racing. But unless they do that, bin it off.
Just that the circuit. Everyone loves the circuit, but the races like before then,
the V8 era, and it's not the V8 era anymore.
Yeah, like the 05 race, nothing happened. 06 was Massa's first win, wasn't it? 07, Massa really won it. Hamilton got a puncture. 08, nothing happened. Massa won. Massa always won at the really boring circuits because he was always winning there and Bahrain and blah blah.
Bahrain was his real kind of penchant, wasn't it?
Yeah. 09, Button won. Vettel had pole. 010, Vettel crashes into Webber. 11. Did Hamilton win in 11? I don't think. I'm not sure if Vettel won. No. Vettel won that one. He crashed in practice, but still won the race. The races were just very uneventful, even though the circuit was really good.
That happens sometimes. Abu Dhabi was supposed to be really good for overtaking because it had 2 massive long straights, and we saw what happened in 2010. So
and then they've changed that, and it hasn't really helped. I mean, it benefited one driver on one very specific lap, but otherwise it hasn't changed much. So then if we break into actually Europe itself, well, Hungaroring needs to stay. We need something in Eastern Europe.
I disagree with Hungary being on there just because we need to fit all the other good races in there, and Hungary is just kind of air.
I like the circuit, and again, I think since we're going to bombard it with Western European ones, we need one race in Eastern Europe. So
I'm trying to think
because we're definitely not having Sochi. Unless someone fancies making a street circuit in Kishinev or whatever.
Well, what other countries have we got to play here? So would Poland be classed as Eastern Europe, or is that still because it's attached to Germany?
Okay, there's two things. Yeah, there's two things. Because I mean, I have 2 definitions. So Central Europe, I would say that's like Germany, Austria, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia. But then the last 4 or 5, they said there are also Eastern Europe at the same time. That's kind of But there are some people who think Eastern Europe is like Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic, the former Soviet bloc countries.
That's kind of what I do it as because I know geopolitical knowledge.
I want to use my definition because that way some of the like nice countries get to be in Eastern Europe as well. Not the ones that are
not going to a Moldovan Grand Prix.
Yeah. So because Poland's lovely, Czech Republic is lovely, Hungary is lovely, so it's not just this like Chernobyl cosplay or whatever that you've got going on everywhere else.
I'm trying to think of, does places like Romania have any I know you'd kind of be flash bombed by Andrew Tate if you ever went there, but I'm trying to think of, no, I don't think Romania has any circuits. Poland does, but I can't name them.
Czech Republic has Brno,
and it has Most Autodrom.
Yeah, Brno is really designed for. It wouldn't work. It's really more for motorbikes.
And I think Most could work. I've driven that in a league on F1 Challenge 99 to 02.
Romania doesn't have any circuits. What's that guy? There's a guy, Philip. Someone is a driver.
Philip
Ugran. He was in Formula 3 a couple of years back. He's a driver and he's Romanian, so that they exist. There's not very many of them. There's someone else. There's a couple of other names you can think of, but it's not really a big motoring.
I'm just in the middle of googling Polish racetracks.
I mean, obviously Estonia has drivers in the forms of the Aaron brothers and Yuri Vips that are in the public consciousness.
Yeah,
so that can make interest, but Estonia, I don't think has any circuits.
Well, you need a track that's as big as Paul Aron's muscles, so
yeah. I don't know they just don't have many big circuits at all, really.
I was just remembered the one track I was thinking of in Poland is Tor Poznan.
I've never heard of that.
I will send a picture into producer notes. Hold on. It's 2.5 miles long, so it's on the shorter side, but it looks like it's got a couple of long straights.
Even though he's not in F1 anymore, I think that the Kubica hype would probably be enough to try and justify racing just once in Poland.
There you go.
Because the only other drivers of note, and not that either of them are going to get anywhere near Formula One, are Kasper Stuka and Piotr Wisniewski.
Yes.
Oh, that's not bad as a layout. It looks kind of like Sebring almost.
Or Road America.
Yeah, you could give it a go there. Yeah.
Kubica definitely still has some marketability of their own family across in Poland. It's been a little while since I've been back across there, but obviously he's been associated with Lotus and Orlon, and even when I went then, he this was past the end of when he'd been at Williams and was just a test driver for Alfa Romeo, but you would still see his his likeness kind of plastered all over various kind of motorway surfaces and stuff like that as well, than just his full kind of Alfa kit with the Orlon sponsorship across it as well. So he's still kind of spoken about quite a lot over there and recognised and revered in a way. So whether that's enough to quite justify putting a whole Grand Prix over there is another thing, but it's definitely still a presence over there more than it used to be.
I think I don't know what you'd call the race without being culturally insensitive, but if you did like a kind of a Eastern European Grand Prix, I think it would be good. And also we could have a moment like where, because with India, kind of, I don't know if it was fully intended this way, but part of the hype was Karthik Kayan was appearing in the race, and it was like his first Grand Prix since like 2005. So maybe you could, I mean, Kubica's what is he's like 40, 41, 42, so maybe not. But you could have him in some sort of testing role, just kind of appearing at the race saying hi, kind of thing.
Or we could present the shows. I mean, okay, that was Karthik Kayan's first race since Valencia, not since 2005. He basically had to like force them to get him to come be allowed to race there in place of Liuzzi.
He beat Ricardo during the weekend. He was very good.
Yeah, he did. I mean, Ricardo had something broke on the car, but still, he had to do an extra pit stop. But hey, it counts. Chantok, they let him do Lotus. They hated him by that point. They let him do FP1, and that was it. It's like maybe you could have thrown, even though he sucked balls in Germany, maybe you could have thrown him in so we could have two. How often are you going to get two Indian drivers in one race? Let's be honest. So why not? Yeah, I mean, again, because of them, it's like you could. There's a bit of an impetus to try and resurrect the Grand Prix. Okay, so if we get to the real meat of it, so the Western European circuits. So, well, Germany and France both have to be there.
Yes,
for legacy states, we have to.
The question is where, because France doesn't have any good circuits.
Germany's easier. As much as I think that Hockenheim and the Nürburgring are overrated, one of them has to come back.
Full Nordschleife. I'm saying it now.
If
we put Bathurst on, I want full Nordschleife on this.
I want to see it done once, just to see if it can be done. Like logistically, you would have to rewrite a lot of rules. I mean, qualifying would take forever because do an out lap, a hot lap, and an in lap would take almost 15 minutes.
I say you could just trial a one-shot qualifying system.
That's the only way you could do it, and probably get them to go out every 30 seconds because then they're not going to get in each other's way.
Unless they have a crash and then they have to stop it all again.
But also, the thing is, it'd be fine because if you make a mistake, if you lock up at the first turn, it's like, okay, well, there's 200 other corners to go. I can make up the time. As anyone who played the missions in Gran Turismo, that fucking Mercedes last to first bollocks, where you have to sit there for 2 minutes waiting for the others to go. It's like, oh, I can make up the time somewhere else.
The only problem with that is you would essentially have to rewrite every barrier that ever existed and take away the culture and the character of the circuit completely because
there's no tech pro. Yeah,
they would just like that's what I don't like about the Nordschleife. I believe that it should just stay as it is, a kind of an old relic and a hark to the past that does still do modern racing, GT cars and stuff like that. I think that you've got Hockenheim, you've got the Nürburgring, you've got other prominent circuits in Germany. I don't know why the ones that are coming to my head are the ones from the yesteryear, the Felderbergring, the Battenbergring, Avers.
Of course, we mentioned it as a joke at the start, but why not just try Avers again?
Well, you couldn't have a Nordkercher or whatever it's called.
The Wall of Death. The Todesmauer.
No. You couldn't have that anymore, but you could have like the thing is with that is if you just did two hairpins, the problem is because it's a highway, you'd have to do two hairpins, which would kind of kill the drafting style. But you would essentially have, especially if you did it for like right up to the circuit limit, I'm not sure where you could do it, but if you did it right up to the circuit limit, 7 kilometers, 3 kilometers straight of just drivers drafting each other, and if you put some sort of bumpers on the car, some special package for those kind of races, I think you could have a NASCAR style race, and that would be epic to watch Lewis Hamilton try to bump draft his way past Max Verstappen and the alliances they form with engine suppliers and all that sort of stuff. It would be great to see that.
The issue. There are lots of reasons they wouldn't want to race there, but one of them is that tire wear would be non-existent. But also, the brakes, they would be the tires and the brakes would be freezing cold every time you got to each hairpin.
Well,
because they've been
deal with it. Also, by the way, tire wear wouldn't be non-existent because at Daytona, for the Daytona 500, they pit multiple times per race.
I mean, those are very sustained corners. If we brought the hairpins back, those are quite short, quite tight banked hairpins, so it's not really very sustained.
I suppose
corners. But I mean, the first lap would be very entertaining. Watching them run for however long it would take them to get down to that first corner, and then it's just lockups after lockup for the hairpin.
Yeah.
No, that's a circuit. Again, it's a bygone age. Realistically, it's going to be either the Grand Prix Strecke or it's going to be the Hockenheim Ring.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other adaptations or alterations we can make, because I think because they're both pretty future-proof in terms of long straights into tight corners. And I don't think we can go as far to bring back the old layout of the Hockenheim Ring, because although we'd all love it, I think that's too far gone by this point. But yeah. I mean, you could just do an alteration. We've had alterations before.
Again, there's or just do what it used to be. One of them does Germany, the other one has the European, because the European is a good fail-safe for circuits that don't make the cut. You can just alternate between 4 or 5.
What I believe the European Grand Prix is it has to be a different circuit every 5-year rotation, so you can't have the same circuit in a 5-year span. That'd be fair.
If there was just 5 circuits and it's like alternate each of them, something like that. But yeah, another one, and this maybe is to suck up to Ciaron's server, is the Kimi Ring, the notion of a Finnish Grand Prix.
What does that actually look like? Let me go and have a look.
Well, I think it's a building site. I'm not sure if it's actually even been finished. Because the only finished. Very good. Because the only Scandinavian race we've had was Onderstorp. And like Norway, amazingly, because Hauger's obviously not going to Formula One. I mean, we've never had any Norwegian drivers, which seems kind of surprising because we've had Danes, we've had Swedes, we've had Finns, but none of them.
Yeah, I mean, up there, it's amazing that Norway's just kind of always been the anomaly in that way.
Yeah.
There's obviously more of a rallying scene around those kind of parts, but like you say, we've always had Finns and Swedes have been quite an integral part of F1 history, from Peterson to Hakkinen or something like that as well.
Well, because I mean, Finland is due a race because they punch well above their weight in terms of drivers. So why not?
Well,
yeah.
It's always been said really that Hungary's kind of the unofficial Finnish race, isn't it? Because I think most Finns do end up.
They go there because it's the closest. That's what like Austria was before Zandvoort came back as well. That's where the Orange Army would go. Yeah, as well.
I've also just remembered. Do you guys probably remember it more so than I do because I wasn't even into F1 at that point? But do you remember the Grand Prix World Championship when F1 had that breakaway? When that breakaway,
yeah,
they had Helsinki Thunder as a potential venue for that race.
Never heard of that. It sounds like some stadium thing to me.
It sounds American. I'll send it. It looks horrendous, so I'm not suggesting we use it, but I'll send it into the thing just for comedic effect. There it is. It looks horrendous, yeah.
I mean, it looks like I don't know what's going on with that final bit. It's like it's an interesting variation on Jeddah. The thing is, they're not quite 90-degree turns.
Yeah,
it's so unnecessarily wiggly.
It looks like someone was trying to draw Avis and then sneezed halfway through.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, or it's like it's like someone been chewing on Adelaide. Yeah, I don't know. No, maybe turn some of those 90-degree turns into actual 90-degree turns, and it could work, but that's not brilliant. Yeah. So France, because France has the problem that all of their circuits are shit. There's loads of them, but none of them are good. So it's like, which one?
So we've got Monaco doesn't produce any good racing. Paul Ricard again, it's good, but it just never really got a chance to shine in F1.
It could if they got rid of that fucking hairpin in the middle of the Mistral Straight, maybe.
Or chicane.
Chicane, yeah.
And I mean, what you could do is you could then do that and then kind of turn scene, because there's a massive bunch of runoff. If you turn scene into a sharp corner rather than just a flat out one, it could invite overtaking.
Well, doesn't it have like 200 possible configurations you could use?
I was going to say, it offers up a variability that you could really have fun playing around with in terms of every single time we went there, we could do it slightly differently.
Well, they could do that across the weekend. Every session is a different layout. Like they have like a
because then someone would forget and then just crash into everyone.
Well, no, it would be funny because there'd be like a lottery between each session. It's like which layout we're using the number 5 layout. Oh no, for qualifying it's the number 30. For race it's the number 2. You know, that'd be amazing. Especially for the race, we end up with the shortest possible layout and it's like half a mile long or whatever.
No,
that's one way to spice that one up. But the other ones, because Le Mans, we can't. Le Mans, it's
already too related to the Le Mans.
It's Wex turf. We can't go there.
And they did Le Mans so many years ago, and it just didn't work.
Bugatti.
60s, but still, yeah.
Dijon is too small. Yes. Charade, the modern Charade is too small. Restgue is, well, the infrastructure is still there. I mean, not all of the circuit is, but that maybe not. Rouen is not brilliant, and drivers died there and stuff. They don't have there's not one obvious one.
Actually, you say the modern circuit is too short. I believe that with some alterations, this, which is the modern layout, could be made feasible.
It's tiny though. It's about 2 miles long. Like it's
that is. I think, let me just check. It's 2.4. With alterations, that could work.
Yeah, it's just the thing is, looking at that, there is no possible way you could do any overtakes.
Get rid of the see that Virage du Manson. Make that all the way up to the hairpin is straight.
Yeah, it's. I suppose that part is no longer public roads, but it would just. I don't know how easy that would be because it's on the side of a volcano, so they're a bit limited geographically in how they can change it. It's just.
Could we do something? Because there's always been this very silly thing throughout F1 history of national Grand Prix not being held in the nation. For example, the Swiss Grand Prix being held in Dijon in the 80s, and obviously the San Marino Grand Prix not in San Marino, the Luxembourg Grand Prix. We'll call something the French Grand Prix, but we might have to nip across to another country and just call that the French Grand Prix to kind of nip both of those at the same time. Yeah, we'll go back to Bremgarten. Verse of it.
Do it in Brands Hatch. William the Conqueror intensifies. That can be the French Grand Prix.
Well, you could even This is a complete...
street circuit in Hastings or Battle in East Sussex, maybe Eastbourne.
This is a completely alien train of thought. But what about their Dom-Tom territories? Their overseas territories.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Well, do they have? What do they have? So they got Reunion, Martinique and Guadeloupe,
French Guyana,
New Caledonia. Is that French? Was that British? Is that French. Tahiti, French Polynesia.
French Guyana also exists.
French Guyana. French Guyana is France. That's the thing, because you have this metropolitan France, a race in the rainforest. Yeah, one of their little islands. I don't know. None of those. Yeah.
The only problem with that it'll be geographically just fucked, essentially.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If we're talking about this in the 1950s when they still had their empire, then they could just pick somewhere in North Africa, like with Morocco, and do it that way. But it's kind of shocking that they have all those circuits and none of them are good, really.
I mean, you could just find one of them and chop them up, like what I was thinking of, because Dijon is very small and it's very pathetic. But the surrounding area, from what I remember, I know I've only looked at like circuit maps from the 70s, but it was just trees. Just cut down some trees and make a long layout like they do with Brands Hatch.
Yeah, I feel like it's just as a temporary failsafe, it would just say Magny-Cours. Go back there.
No, I prefer Paul Ricard. I prefer Paul Ricard any day of the week over Magny-Cours.
The circuit is fine. It's just I know the races were bollocks, but it's got
Paul Ricard at least offers up overtaking rather than Magny-Cours, which was very processional.
Maybe Paul Ricard.
Magny-Cours as a circuit is nice and flowing, and then you have that homosexual last what's it called, right hand 90-degree corner. I mean, horrible.
The chicken. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, they put that in to try and improve the racing, and it just made it worse.
Right. Because
after Schumacher won the title with 6 races to go, and then the following year wins it on a 4-stop strategy. Maybe Paul Ricard just for the time being until they can build a good circuit for once.
Yeah.
So okay, Italy, Monza is doing it. Is doing Italy.
I have a point here I want to make. Bring back the oval layout, get rid of the first 2 chicanes. We want a super speedway race.
Yeah.
And the Ascari chicane. Take it back to the 1950s.
Fuck it, why not? I mean, the cars are so safe now. Like, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, they're already going fast enough as it is through Curva Grande. Just, yeah.
Yes.
They'll be fine. The oval is quite... The banking is quite something, but we got to try it.
Just renovate it, make sure it's not bumpy as hell, make sure there are actual safety barriers and safer barriers, should I say.
Needs to,
get it to like a Zandvoort level of that kind of safe-ish banking, but we still get that lovely spectacle of them kind of swooping around at that kind of...
Maybe it needs to be not quite so extreme angle, but it needs to be there in some... We need to do something different. And also, this is the pinnacle of motorsport, so we really need to be pushing the extreme circuit design.
The only problem I can see with it is because obviously back in the 50s and 60s, it was just the 2 circuits were just separated by hay bales.
Yeah, you would need a very, very wide main straight to accommodate the pit lane as well. But that can be done easily enough.
I mean, I think you would also need to put bumpers on the cars. You'd need to, or some sort of like...
That would destroy the aerodynamics.
Or some sort of thing that stops them from like just losing their front wing trying to push each other or whatever.
Yeah, I think there is enough. I mean, the only breaking point would be the Lesmo corners.
And
Parabolica. Yeah, you wouldn't break anywhere else. There's enough. I think it could work. But then Imola, you can continue to call it Emilia Romagna or the San Marino Grand Prix.
No, Imola's shit. Sorry, in the modern, unless you get rid of the first 2 chicanes. The reason why Senna and Ratzenberger died were because of car issues and the fact they decided to put concrete barriers on the exit of really fast corners.
Yeah, I mean, Gerhard Berger's crash again, that was the car braking. But even so, the circuit is just fantastic. It looks so good. Like, it just aesthetically, it could not be more perfect. I want to keep Imola. I'd
argue put it in the European Grand Prix rotation just because I don't think it's good enough to deserve its own place. But
maybe yes. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say the same thing with Mugello because I want Mugello to be there, unless we make that the Papal States Grand Prix or something.
Vatican Grand Prix.
Yeah, because it's nowhere near it, but the Public of Genoa Grand Prix as well, or Genoa or whatever. No, I want all 3 of those need to be on there. So we did those, France, Spa, Belgium, easy enough.
Yes.
Zandvoort's being dropped after 26.
It doesn't deserve a place in calendar. It's just boring.
Yeah, it's a bit... They have kind of emasculated it a bit with this modern layout, but it looks fun. It's different because it looks like a roller coaster.
Apart from
that little roller coaster section,
name one thing that's happened there. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, Max getting his fan base. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't...
It's just again, it's kind of it was emasculated for good reason. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to see like Roger Williamson and guys like that just dying every time we go there. And I think it was Piers Courage also died there. I don't want to see deaths, so just leave it. Like go back to endurance racing or GTs or whatever regional formulas they do. Find the next match happen and then come back to us. Then we've got places like Austria.
Red Bull Ring is staying.
Yes. We need to also keep an eye on how many circuits we have on the calendar, by the way.
Yes, I stopped. Okay, right.
Where are we at?
Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Baku. We said Bahrain, didn't we? So that's 6.
Bahrain,
Turkey.
Yes.
Right, did we say Turkey?
No.
Hungary, somewhere in Finland. / Eastern Europe.
Well, if we say you hit Finland, we can bin off Hungary, and I think Hungary's a bit naff.
I guess we don't. There's no Hungarian drivers, so that's fine. Yeah. Okay, Finland, Austria, Hockenheim, and Nürburgring.
Oh well, Hockenheim and just the European Grand Prix.
Yeah. But we, We'll see that as one
in that jumble. Yeah.
Paul Ricard, so that's 11.
Yes.
Monza makes 12. Spa makes 13. Monaco makes 14.
Yeah.
Silverstone is...
Okay, yeah, Silverstone. Forgot about that.
Silverstone is going to make 15.
Yes.
Catalonia, that we need Spain.
No. We don't need Spain.
We kind of need Spain.
But what are you going to do for the American and South American leg?
Canada, US, Mexico, Brazil.
I think we should have Argentina over Spain.
We're not. We can't realistically drop Spain with Sainz and Alonso still here. I know it's shit, and I know the races are shit, but the attendance is like top notch, and it's.
I have an idea that's not going to be liked, but I think we should put Hungary and Finland into the European Grand Prix.
They can go in the rotation.
So that gives us more spaces, and then we can put Spain in there.
Yeah, because I was thinking if we need to put Portimao in as well, or
Portimao is so shit. I don't know
or Estoril.
Estoril is in current form. It's like you literally cut the balls off an Italian stallion. It's ruined.
Okay, so we got those. Then we move on. I mean, as I said, there's for the moment 4 circuits of the Americas. Yeah, Montreal, COTA. Again, people are going to say, well, there needs to be more than one circuit in America, and maybe 2. They can have 2. So
I think we should have a rotating American Grand Prix or 2 races. I believe that Road America needs to be on the calendar. For me, I don't know why F1 has never gone there. It's big enough. It's got enough long straights. It's got enough entertainment factor, and it's got enough elevation. It's perfect. I'll send the layout, by the way.
If I was going to originally say US Grand Prix East and US Grand Prix West, and the West one would be COTA, and the East, my first thought was either Watkins Glen or Indianapolis.
Watkins Glen isn't big enough, and Indianapolis is a bit boring. I'd just go Road America, to be honest, as the only track on the calendar. Watkins Glen.
What's the situation with that Chicago street circuit they were talking about last year? Is that are they still trying to push that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll just quickly put it in producer notes, by the way. That's the layout of Road America, because that's why, it's going to come in a horrible blackout because it's transparent image. Hopefully you can still see the rough outline.
Okay, so turn 1 and 3. Yeah, there's about, there's maybe at least 4 overtaking spots there.
Yeah.
And I know it's a very steep run up to the first corner.
Yeah, there is a big hill, but as long as you're not a stupid idiot, you can't crash on a straight, so you're fine. I think I could just be the only. Mexico doesn't need to stay on the calendar because it's just shit, and there's no Sergio Perez anymore. I believe that we should, because we have Brazil, obviously, Interlagos, and I believe we should have an Argentine Grand Prix, whether it be Buenos Aires, whether it be Portirelo de los Funes, whatever.
Marketing is probably going to dictate this now that we have to race in Argentina.
I know Portirelo de los Funes got closed down. Potrero de los Funes. I will send the layout of this circuit because the surroundings of this track are amazing. I just like to point out, is one of the best looking circuits of all time in terms of surroundings.
Yeah, because Buenos Aires, its surroundings are not brilliant. Just a swamp next to a canal, and the circuit kind of bubbling away as if it's built on a
around a lake.
landfill.
It's like Enapagusa, except less AIDS, basically.
Right.
I can't, for some reason, I can't save the picture of the actual layout. It's being stupid. But let me just.
But I feel like we've reached 18 or 19 with that because we skipped over putting Africa in, and then it's just that we have it probably ends up being about half a dozen European circuits on rotation.
Yes. For
Europe. Okay, so what actually would be those? So we said Nürburgring probably. Mugello, Imola, Kimi Ring, Hungary. Are there any others that we should throw in on rotation?
I'm trying to think of other ones. Maybe a second Spanish circuit.
Jarama's too small.
Would it be offered to Brands Hatch in there?
Maybe Brands. I mean, because they have. Yeah, well, to be honest, we probably. I mean, I think it's grade 2 now. But
I think Brands Hatch is too short. I don't like the lap times would be 58 seconds, and it's not like Bahrain Auto where you got loads of straights.
Well, it has a couple. It has 2 pretty big straights. Just neither of them go into. Yeah. Modern F1 cars would be fun with the suspension.
Hot lap, yes, I love Hot F1 2013, but otherwise no, I just don't think it should be.
Yeah.
Anyway, the only thing I could see was I made an alternate layout of Donington.
Unfortunately. Tilke's work was undone and they restored it back to how it was supposed to be after that got scrapped. But Donington is way too narrow, and it's too. I mean, they did it once. It was a good race. I mean, I'd love it to try that again. But those are the only realistic ones because the other British circuits are too small.
Yes.
The only other
the problem you have with Donington is it does kind of have its own little kind of legacy in the spot because of that one race and. The centre wet weather masterclass about it.
If it rains, everyone is.
That was
everyone loses their minds. Otherwise,
the thing is, if we
nothing else could live up to that.
The thing is, if we go there and it rains again, everyone's going to wait, expecting Lewis to put on the same performance or something.
I just sent my Donington layout.
Okay, well, other than making it longer, I don't think it really adds much by a wiggly bit that doesn't do anything. What is that? Is that the Argentine one?
But one above is Portugal's Funes, yeah.
I mean, yeah, very pretty, but not ideal for Formula One. It looks like the GT6, that Sierra, the enormous challenge you do round the lake, overtaking It's kind of like that, but on a smaller scale.
Oh, but it is it's about 6 kilometers, so it is in the FIA like.
Get rid of that tiny little chicane on the back straight. Actually, get rid of both the chicanes, and you've got some potential there.
Yes.
That's not bad design. So I think we listed about 6 circuits you could have on rotation. We had, because you proposed the notion of an Asian Grand Prix, but
we're going to have India and South Korea kind of.
It would just between those.
Now, so we need an actual Excel spreadsheet to be able to properly lay this out, or some sort of graphic, because we're kind of higgledy-piggledy at the moment.
Yeah, another thing is that in real life, I think we're probably losing Mexico soon because the contract expires at the end of this year and Checo's gone. And I don't think Pato Award's coming in anytime soon either, so there's no impetus to keep it. Even though it's a great circuit and attendance is good, and I think we'll quickly probably learn why attendance was so good.
I don't know why you think it's a great circuit, but yeah, it just doesn't.
Okay, Tilke has killed it, but it's still good, even with him, massacring it. But
I think it's got iconic parts to it. I think that the part where they go through the grandstand with that all around through that what is the baseball park there, I think is very memorable. We don't really have much else like that.
Yeah, that needs to go. I want the full banking back, because that thing doesn't. It's so tight. You can't. Other than looking cool, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah,
I want the full banking onto that giant straight.
Apart
would
from
be amazing.
Name one good race that happened there. That's what I'll say.
17, the title fight. 18, nothing happened. 16 was kind of tense because Hamilton cut the corner and got away with it because, of course, he did. And Vettel was swearing at Charlie Whiting.
But there's not had any sort of properly banger races, which is what I don't.
Yeah, but then there are loads of circuits which haven't had banger races in ages, and we still keep them.
It has no slipstream because they are literally a million billion years above sea level.
That's a good trade-off considering how long that straight is, because otherwise overtaking would be too easy.
I agree, but also it just for me it just doesn't produce anything of note. Really,
I think another thing that affects it is that it's not the safest Grand Prix just for the drivers and team personnel, getting to and from the circuit. And I mean, Brazil has had this problem before as well, but it's worse in Mexico.
And also, Brazil has the added thing of actually being a really nice circuit that everyone likes.
Yeah, and it rains. I mean, I don't think it's rained. It's probably rained in the past, but not since the comeback. It hasn't rained in Mexico. But because in Brazil, I mean, Jacarapagua's gone. The Brasilia circuit looks very similar to Caesar's Palace.
Yeah, there's a lot of the stuff, the street circuits they use for Brazilian stock cars. And they are just the ones that I see Southpaw Racer do on his channel. A bit of a shout out there, but he does loads of guides of these Brazilian, because he goes on Automobilista, which was originally a game designed to just be Brazilian stock cars, and there's awful Londrina. I'm trying to think of what Curitiba and places like that. It's just awful. Yeah, just I think Brazil can just stay where it is.
Yeah. I wonder if there are any countries we've overlooked that would be viable in the future.
South America, there's not really anything. North America, Central America, I don't think so.
El Salvador's coming up under Nayib Bukele. Maybe they'll build a circuit in the future. I don't know.
No,
but I don't think so.
There was a talk about a Caribbean Grand Prix in Colombia with in Barranquilla.
Yes.
I don't remember that one, but that's I I don't think that's going to be happening soon.
I don't think it will either.
The Cuban wasn't that back in the 50s or 60s? The Cuban Grand Prix.
Yeah, because it was
the one where Fangio was kidnapped, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was under Castro's predecessors. So
yeah, I don't think anyone wants Colapinto getting kidnapped. So let's not go there. There's nowhere else. I mean, we had because Barbados has it's that little kart circuit, isn't it? That say Maloney does, and that's where he kind of started racing. Bushy Park, yeah.
It's going to send weapons of mass destruction to the Middle East, Bushy Park.
Yes. Well, yeah. Why not just have a Guantanamo Bay race or something? There's no the realistic. Yeah, the Caribbean, they don't have the infrastructure, and there's nowhere suitable because we're not racing in Jamaica. We're definitely not racing in Haiti or like Dominica or Africa, as we'd said, the only realistic option really is South Africa still.
And even then, it's not realistic because of everything that goes on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're making our list and you kind of have Africa on a separate, we kind of have like a little to-do list of stuff we need to finish out in the future. And Africa, I think, is probably top of that. I think for the sake of it being a world's championship, there does need to be something over there to kind of encompass that spirit. But I don't know if we have something that ticks that box just yet, but we need to look at it.
To be fair, for the first however many years of a world championship, well, we didn't go to South Africa until, in terms of a Formula 1 world championship race, until 62. And even then, when we've done it with Prince George and with Kyle Army, I'm pretty sure for like half, maybe 3/4, 2/3 of F1 history, we haven't had a world championship in every continent. So I think it's not necessary, but I would like to go to Africa, but it has to be done right. It can't be because it's Africa. It has to be because the circuit is good. Yeah, it can't be like with Zandvoort or whatever, where it's just because it's Dutch. Okay,
so I've got the list here of FIA Grade 1 circuits. I'll try and point out the ones Formula 1 doesn't currently race that and see if there's any overlooked. So Estoril, Portimao, Mugello, Bud, Buriram, which I'd mentioned before in Thailand.
Yeah.
But that's just Alex Albon is the only draw, even though he's Thai in name only, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's a really boring looking circuit as well.
I think we can stick Bud on there or Yongam.
Let's see, Manicourt, Port Ricard, Jerez is. I don't think Jerez is going to happen.
Too short.
Jerez good for testing, always was.
Yeah.
But
the Dubai Autodrome, which is just an even worse version of Abu Dhabi.
It's better, but it's still not. It's not F1 standard.
It kind of annoys me a bit that there are enough races to have like a regional Formula 1 championship, because you could do 6 races in the Middle East because Kuwait has a circuit as well.
Kuwait Town, yeah.
Yeah, so you could very easily have a 6-race winter series, like they already do a GP2 and that. A 6-race winter series in the Middle East.
In lower junior forms like F4.
Yeah. Igora Drive, we're not going to Moscow Russia anytime soon. Indy, again, Yong'an, we mentioned, Q8 Motortown. What does it actually look like?
It's a decent-ish layout, to be fair.
Moscow Raceway, I've never heard of that one. I think that maybe one has a street circuit. So there's 3 in... Yeah. Oh, Aragon. Aragon? I didn't think that was grade 1. That's like a private testing circuit, isn't it?
I thought it was a motorbike circuit.
Yeah, it's mostly done motorbikes for a few years.
Oh, okay, no,
jumped in as a stand-in one year and it's kind of become a mainstay.
It's not the one I was thinking of. Okay, that would be. I can't think of a worse circuit for Formula 1. Looking at that,
no, it's bike centric, not for cars.
I was thinking of the one. There's that private. That private test circuit in the south of Spain, which is Gran Turismo 5, when you have to drive the fucking Bugatti Veyron round it, and it just won't brake and it won't turn.
I don't know, because I'm a Forza guy. I don't know.
I think it begins with A. It'll come to me in a second. Not Algarve.
Because that's not Spain.
Like Forza. It's near Jerez. It's in the south.
GT6 Spanish track.
It's like a private circuit.
I will. So is it? I'll just go through the track list and look for the Spanish ones in Gran Turismo 6. Ascari.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. But no, not for Formula 1. Sepang's gone. Yeah, okay. There's actually relatively few that we either don't use or have never used that are grade 1. Q8 Motortown. That's not a good track. There's too many corners looking at that now. Moscow Raceway, they all look the same. This kind of looks like Kota, actually. It's got elements of that. But we're not racing.
Like other circuits, so
Yeah, we're not racing in Russia anytime soon. Yeah, Aragon as well. Wouldn't do it. Yeah, there aren't many options to go out the box because it will be forever if we start running around looking at grade 2 and lower. About any that could be like upgraded.
Yes.
To grade 1 level. But there's a lot of there are a lot of former circuits, F1 circuits that are now like grade 2 and lower.
Are we now going to go for, because we did for a lot of the circuits, we did put them in like chronological order of where they would be on the calendar. But like, for example, when we were going for all the European ones, we did like Silverstone was like 15th on the calendar. Do we want to put those all in order?
We can. I was trying a roughly sort of east to west thing.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what they usually do.
Yeah. So like starting in, of course, we're not using Hungary formally, but well, one of those is the European race. I guess then Austria would come up, Germany. But we have to go south to Italy at some point. Yeah. Italy, Monaco, France can be in a group together. Yeah. Then do Austria and Germany and Spa and the UK and then Spain.
Yeah, that's fine. And then we hop over the pond, as they say.
Yeah, Canada, America. Apparently not.
Canada, it will probably be like September time.
Well, they did that before. Mosport and Mont Tremblant were always in September, October.
It was just a bit cold.
They could do it. So they can. I'm sure they could handle it. I mean, we've had it, pissing down with rain in July in Montreal in races. It's not going to snow or anything, so they'll be fine with that. There's not my knowledge of Canadian circuits. Like the only other one I know of is the Vancouver Street Circuit, but I don't think that's been used in years.
There's Mont Tremblant, but I suppose it's owned by Lawrence Stroll, so
and it's too small. Mosport again is grade 2, and they stopped racing there because it was too dangerous.
Yeah,
I don't know any other Canadian circuits. They could, I'm sure they could bullshit a street circuit in Toronto or something.
Yeah, they do have one. They have a Toronto Grand Prix in IndyCar, so.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course they do. Yeah.
And then we've got Canada and the USA. So then you've got what's his face? South America, Argentina, and Brazil.
That's probably enough.
Yeah. So how many is that in total then? Is it 20 or is it 19?
Probably. I've lost. Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Baku, Germany, Austria, Italy, France, Monaco. That's 10.
Spain, UK,
Spain,
Europe.
Belgium, UK, Europe. Canada.
We said Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Canada, US, Brazil. That's 18.
Okay, add Korea in there and add India in there. 20.
Okay. Yeah. Seems to work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that sounds interesting enough. I don't know how close we'll ever get to that because it seems like they've listened a bit, like with putting more and more, the calendar's a bit more streamlined this year. They've swapped some of them around, but it's still a bit too compacted for my liking. Yeah, so I guess we did a bit of a free for all today, and just see. I mean, we started talking about Nick de Vries and Formula 2, and then it turned into the calendar and stuff. But obviously, main bulk of it is the calendar. This is something that people tend to discuss a lot. So obviously, if any of our listeners have your own thoughts on what should or shouldn't be on the calendar, let us know in the comments. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Goodbye.